Hey everyone! As you probably noticed, I haven't posted any videos in a long while because I did have some really interesting things happening in real life. Don't worry, it's just all good things. But now that most of it is pretty much done, I'm finally back with what is supposed to be one of the most interesting gaming monitors coming to the market this year, the ASUS ROG Swift PG32UQX. So this is a 32-inch monitor with a 4K IPS panel and a 144Hz refresh rate, but the most interesting thing about it is that it has a mini LED backlight with full array local dimming and a display HDR 1400 label. Now, ASUS already used that mini LED technology before in some of their ProArt monitors, and now they kind of decided to make a gaming monitor as well that will have that same incredible HDR experience combined with a high resolution, high refresh rate, and a pretty high price tag. This is also going to be the first monitor review to feature some of the speed testing that I've been working on lately. So from now on, I'll finally be able to include more data about the actual speed of the panel and see how much of a competitive advantage you will get with each monitor I review. Now, this is just the first step, and I would just love to hear your thoughts and your feedback on the matter, so please don't be shy and leave a comment down below. Let's begin. This video is brought to you by Seasonic and their Prime series power supplies. These top quality power supplies are very efficient, they're whisper quiet, extremely reliable, and my go-to choice for most of my test rigs and builds around here. And to make the deal even sweeter, Seasonic wraps it all up in a cozy 12-year-long warranty. Check them out using the links in the description below. When it comes to design and build quality, ASUS did make some small changes this year, but it is still a typical high-end ROG monitor at its core. It is really well built, it comes with a proper solid metal stand that holds this large 32-inch monitor well in its place without any noticeable wobble. It is height adjustable, you can tilt it and you can swivel it around its axis, but it doesn't rotate, and if you want to, you can even VESA mount it as well. The bezels are not the thinnest, but the front still looks pretty clean, and on the back you get the typical ROG design with a big logo that lights up. It's not bright enough to light up the wall behind it, so unless you intend to show off the back of your monitor, you should probably just turn it off and save a little bit of power in the process. They did change the usual joystick on the back of the monitor and put a little dial on the bottom instead to control the OSD. And to be honest, I do think it will take some time to get used to it. Now, it is definitely more visible and it is easier to reach than a joystick on the back, and it works just completely fine, but it also kind of turns in the opposite way than it's natural to me. And also, while you could use the joystick with one finger while pressing the buttons with others without moving your hand, it just kind of feels like you have to do extra work for every turn and every click with this dial, or you can use two hands to make it quicker, which is kind of just silly. Now, it might be better for some of you out there, and again, it works completely fine, but I still cannot help but wonder why was it necessary to fix things that weren't broken. Anyway, the OSD itself is well laid out, very user-friendly and fast to navigate. It has a ton of extra gaming features, and if you prefer, you can control all of the settings with the software as well using your keyboard and your mouse instead. Instead of the usual sticker logo above the dial, you get a little OLED display where you can either show the ROG logo animation by default or show your own images or some basic PC information like CPU and GPU temperatures and so on. I do think it's pretty cute and you can play with it a bit and show it off, but it's also a bit of a gimmick, and if not having it would just slightly lower the price of this monitor, I personally would have picked that option. Now, in terms of connections, you get one DisplayPort 1.4 connection, which thanks to DSC is enough to drive 4K 144Hz with HDR without any visible loss of image quality. And there are three HDMI 2.0 connections. There is no HDMI 2.1, I'm afraid, presumably due to the G-Sync Ultimate module, but that does mean that if you're running a PlayStation 5, you will be stuck at 4K 60. Now, ASUS is claiming 4K 120 support for Xbox users by using chroma subsampling to deal with the limitations of the HDMI 2.0 port, but unfortunately, I actually don't have an Xbox, so I cannot tell you if that will affect the visuals in any way or not. Anyway, You get a headphone jack as well and a USB hub, including a USB port on the very top of the monitor. And next to that, you get a little tripod socket. So if you're streaming, for example, you can mount a camera right on top of your monitor, which is pretty cool. There's also a light sensor on top, which can be used to automatically adjust the brightness of the monitor, but I personally think that that is a bit annoying, and if I were you, I would keep it off. HDR is one of the focus points of this monitor. A good HDR will greatly impact image quality and just your whole overall experience, I would say. And a proper HDR consists of three key things: a good range of colors, the ability to go really bright, and some form of local dimming to make dark areas really dark. And while many monitors offer that color performance needed for HDR, most monitors simply don't go bright enough nor offer any kind of local dimming. But this monitor has mini LED backlight, and these little LEDs in the back can go insanely bright, peaking at over 1600 nits, which is almost twice as much as the next gaming monitor in the graph, and it's even slightly more than the non-gaming ProArt mini LED model that I tested before, and even brighter than my LG OLED TV. And I'm not talking here about just quick flashes either. It can easily hold a bright white square of 25% of the monitor surface at over 1500 nits steadily, and at full screen it can do more than 1100 nits steadily, which is incredibly bright. Or if you want to put it in a more realistic gaming perspective, that is enough to make you squint during a sunrise in a proper HDR game, for example, and this is the first time a gaming monitor is able to do that, which is pretty cool. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, the local dimming means that the display can almost completely dim dark areas to look black. Now, it's not going to be an OLED black, but it is still very dark. Even without the HDR enabled, the contrast is 4000 to 1, meaning that this IPS panel actually offers a better contrast than most VA monitors on the market. And in HDR mode, it's closer to 6 times that. So it basically combines all the advantages of a good IPS panel with the contrast of a VA panel with fantastic colors and an extreme brightness. And it just manages to show HDR content and HDR games in a way that they were intended to be seen. And once you experience that, you will finally understand why it's, such a big deal. Now, compared to OLED panels, you do get more brightness, especially when it comes to large, bright areas. So OLED tends to dim a little bit due to power limitations, while this panel goes even brighter. But when it comes to dimming, OLED can dim individual pixels, while this mini LED backlight works in zones. There are 1152 zones that can be dimmed, which is generally enough for you not to notice this when watching movies or when playing games. But when you have tiny bright spots on a dark background, you can actually see a bit of that halo effect. Now, it's not going to be as visible as it was on the PG32UQX, that was a larger screen with fewer zones, but you can see it a bit when you move a white cursor over a dark area. Now, when it comes to color performance, ASUS is using an IPS panel with quantum dots, offering full sRGB gamut coverage, full Adobe RGB gamut coverage, and 95.8% DCI-P3 gamut coverage. Factory calibration is mostly great, showing near perfect accuracy right out of the box. Even the uniformity is really good, so I would say it is a pretty ideal panel when it comes to any color critical work. But how fast is it when it comes to gaming? Now, as I said at the start, this is going to be the first monitor review that will feature some of the data measured with the help of the new NVIDIA Latency Analyzer, which is a handy little tool that can measure how long does it take for something that's happening in the game to actually appear on your screen. Now, as reference, I'll be using the ASUS ROG PG32UQX, which is a 360Hz monitor, and it is generally accepted as the fastest panel on the market right now. And I've also just tested the Gigabyte's new Fi32Q, which is another 32-inch monitor with a bit more focus on image quality instead of just speed. And it is also an IPS panel with 170 Hz refresh rate, so it should be more directly comparable to this 32-inch in terms of speed. Now, the PG32UQX turned out to be around 6.5 milliseconds slower than the PG259QNR on average, or just under 5 milliseconds slower than the FI32Q, which also kind of seems reasonable for a monitor with more complicated backlight and a lower refresh rate. Now, there's not really a difference that you would ever notice while playing most games, and it's definitely not enough for it to feel anything less than fast. So I would say it would matter only if you play at a very top professional level where every millisecond can count. But then I don't think that this large 4K 144Hz HDR beast would be the monitor you should consider for your competitive career. Now, technically, you can reduce the latency a little bit more by setting the overdrive to extreme, which will cut the average latency by less than half a millisecond, but it will also introduce a little bit of overshoot. Now, I would say it's not really a problematic amount, and you will notice it only if you're just looking for it, but I would still recommend the default normal overdrive setting, as that doesn't have any overshoot, and it's only less than a half millisecond slower, which really isn't a huge deal, if you ask me. Since this is a G-Sync Ultimate display, G-Sync obviously works perfectly with NVIDIA GPUs, but it also seems to work perfectly with AMD GPUs. And having VRR support is very important because this is a 4K screen, and it still can be hard to run some games smoothly on this resolution, even if you have a high-end graphics card. And I guess that brings me to the final chapter of this review. Who is this monitor for? Now, I have no doubt that this is simply the most impressive immersion style gaming monitor that money can buy right now. The image quality and the HDR experience are just out of this world, and unlike on the older ProArt versions, the 144Hz refresh rate is enough to make this feel like a proper, fast gaming monitor. But it's still not perfect. There's still some light haloing present on the dark backgrounds, and the lack of an HDMI 2.1 is quite unfortunate because it kind of robs it of being the ultimate console monitor as well. And last but not least is its high price. So this gaming version of an already pricey ProArt monitors will be too expensive for most gamers out there, and we will simply have to admire it from afar and wait patiently for all these features to become more mainstream. So for now, this will be for those PC gaming enthusiasts that have plenty of money to spend on a monitor and that want that best HDR gaming experience no matter the cost. Now, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this review as much as I enjoyed making it. Thank you so much for watching and for sticking to the very end, and I do hope to see you in the next one. Bye guys!